you first.
Yeah.
But before that, sir,
Yeah.
I would like to say something, sir.
Please go ahead.
एतद् देश प्रसूतस्य सकाशात् अग्रजन्मनः स्वं संचरित्रं शिक्षेरन् पृथिव्यां सर्वमानवाः. Likewise, we have Professor Dr. Anil Maheshwari ji with us to guide us with his words. I now invite you, sir, for your points, your comments, and your talk.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate this opportunity to chair this session and the opportunity to share some remarks. First thing is to just give summary of the presentations. I think, they're very diverse. The first couple were more about actual research. The first one, we had somebody using Voyager software to analyze, certain phenomena in the sky. And then we had the Anupji, I think, the IS officer. He was talking about wonderfully about Arun Upadhyay ji is talking about variety of hypotheses that should be tested. And then we had, talking about Gödel's theorem, etc. Then I think Asha Raniji was wonderfully describing the research methodology that's been laid out in Brihana Upanishad. That was good. And she talked about, I enjoyed that she said that it's a three-part process, the researcher, what is being researched, and the process of research, what you call experience, and experienced, or what we sometimes call knower, known, and process of knowing. I enjoyed that she brought about this idea of the curiosity of the person, the researcher, and an endless process of research. That's what was important to keep research going. I enjoyed also the talk about the next two talks about relating Vedic to a particular social system, communism, and then relating to Karma Yoga and citing this whole idea. One of my favorite sentences is that the heights attained by great men and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but rather their companions slept or toiling upwards in the night, which is the idea that you keep working while others may be enjoying life. I mean, you can enjoy your life and working. So I wanted to, the theme of the session today was actually research. So I want to make a distinction between scholarship and science. A lot of what we have heard in the last few days I've really enjoyed, and we've brought out a lot of knowledge from Vedas. But also, if you move forward to the science part, and Dr. Subhashji, who was my dear friend and former teacher at IIT Delhi, and he brought out also this idea that we should, not pick one thing here and one thing there, but just bring it all together in terms of a cohesive research process in which we try to prove something. And what are the things we want to prove? What do we care about? I mean, why do we live? I would say, imagine, what do we want from Vedas? Why do we study Vedas? We want happiness, we want joy, we want bliss. And isn't that what we want for ourselves, for our children, for our families, and everybody? So, I was thinking maybe we have a master hypothesis for the future research. This is those who follow Vedic knowledge, science, processes, practices have following this leads to happy, healthy, prosperous lives, communities. And then we can pick some aspect of Vedas and some aspects of the benefit and try to correlate. And we can go beyond just the society, and we can go to astronomy, and we can go to the various the levels that Arunji wonderfully laid out. The whole the universe can be seen at many, many, many dimensions, many orders of magnitude. It doesn't have to be restricted at the human scale. So I thought that, and then who mentioned? I think Ashaji mentioned this idea of darshanas. So I mean, at least all 6 darshanas would be great, but I would just simplify. There are 3 major ways of proving something, and especially when you're talking about good, happy, healthy, blissful life. Certainly scriptures is one way where we can say, okay, scriptures say if you do this, it'll lead you to better health and so on and so forth. A second is science, where you obviously follow ceteris paribus principle, where you do all things being equal. If you did this and you try with some people and then you get that. And of course, the highest quality of evidence is your personal experience. If you enjoy, doing something and it works for you, I mean, obviously you learn, and then that commits you to sort of wanting to do more. So the curiosity that Ashaji was talking about, I think, comes from when you benefit from something. It means how did it work? I want others to benefit also. I want to explore more about it, and then you become a lifelong seeker, maybe to answer that question and how it can create benefit for others. So, that's what I would love to have going forward, just echoing, some of the messages that I've heard before. Develop a method. We have lots of software. We have a lot of resources now. Maybe it wasn't true 30, 40 years ago, but let's say for the research that we've heard about space and astronomy, ISRO might be there, and we have satellites up there. The data should be available if we set out experiments. Certainly the US people decide certain experiments and then contact NASA and they send out some satellites, student satellites, or at least they're able to give them data to test out certain things. I'm sure Narayanji is into aerospace. He can talk more about that, when we do research at the planetary scale or cosmic scale. And then there are also researchers, we have labs and companies who have a lot of resources to do at that level. So how does all the scales, I would say, if I were to just take our dear IPS officer, his vast range that he laid out for us, that and then there's some researchers who've been talking about that, the frequency range goes from like 10 to 40 approximately to 10 to minus 40. And of course, human range is a little about half of that. So how do we begin to see the vastness of Vedic knowledge and begin to sort of broaden our scope using all the instruments that are available and all the research methodology that's available? And for Vedic, bringing down again back to just what benefit we can get here and now. That's what's important. We don't want to just study for the other, general sake. At this point, how can we benefit society, whether it's migrant labor or COVID? So what processes work, whether certain practices work, or whether certain medications work. I think that will be great for a set of hypotheses for us to work towards, to do more research which can benefit life in the real time. So I'd be glad to take more questions, but I wanted to definitely commend all the presentations, not only just today, but all through the days. And there's so many questions, and we can answer those using our own ingenuity, our curiosity, and our resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your insightful speech. And sir, we have a question that we would like answer from you. Would you like to answer that question, sir?
Sure.
So the question is, perhaps the presenter can discuss how Vedic thinkers dealt with the problem that the leaders who preach socialism and communism to the people are often violent and greedy and are corrupted by power. I believe it's just like a comment more than a question.
Yeah, it's a comment. It's a rhetorical question, and it's not necessarily something that we can answer in any short period of time.
Yes,
we
sir.
can take 3
so
days.
It needs a larger discussion, and I hope as you have been present in all our discussions, we will be having discussion on this as well in later sessions. Now, may I invite our co-chair, Dr. Pankaj Mishra, sir, to come and share his thoughts. But sir, due to paucity of time, we will request you to keep your talk short and crisp.
I know Kamna.
Hello, sir.
After the comment of chairperson, it is just, it is not good for me to comment.
But we would like you to.
Yes, I would like to thank Shashi Tiwari ma'am and the team of Waves who gave me the opportunity to be here to listen to such, the insightful papers. But apart from this, I haven't any word to comment on, because the respected chairperson has already, in length, has already presented, his remarks. And not only his remarks, I think, this session's remarks in nutshell. So once again, thanks to Waves, thanks to Kamna ji, thanks to Chairperson Dr. Anil Maheshwari ji, and I won't take any time. So thank you very much. Thank you, thanks
sir.
to all.
Now, on behalf of my team, I would like to thank my chair and co-chair, Professor Maheshwari ji and Dr. Pankaj Mishra, sir.
Please.
And now I would like to hand over to the next moderator. I am 5 minutes before my time. So in case, sir, you would like to add something to your comments, we have 5 minutes. The credit goes to us. We have wrapped up the session before time.
Well, that's the good thing, right? We can under budget and under
Yes,
time.
sir, we can
So
afford
that-
5 minutes.
Yeah. So maybe Pankaj, you want to take a minute, and I'll take a minute. Quickly,
Pankaj,
if you have
sir.
a comment.
No, I think it's already done. This only my comment was on Tripathi ma'am's paper, and that was like the division of the astic and the nastic. It is not my comment or anything. It's only suggestion. We shouldn't use nowadays this astic and nastic. It should be better Vedic and non-Vedic. So this was my comment, and yes, Professor Bhavra ने बहुत ही सुंदर बड़े अच्छे तरीके से even Upadhyay sir has given. Apart from all these things, we can say for a student like me, the student of Sanskrit like me, can take some points to continue further research in the field of Vedic literature and from Ved also. Because apurvah kopi koshoyam vidyate tava bharati, when it is said, I think it is not about the whole literature. I think particularly it is for Vedic literature. And from Vedic literature itself, we are taking all these ideas, we are taking all this literature, and whosoever the shastras are there, so it is there. So in that sense, yes, we got some insight for the research. In these days, I'm teaching the dates of Rig Veda, and while discussing this vernal equinox, and after this Professor Modak's paper, it was very nice, and especially for me, I have taken some point, the Rohini Shakatam Tusah, and after taking this line, so he has given the references from Brihat Sanghita, from Grahalaga, from Surya Siddhant. So for students like me, I would continue to do some research on this thing, and I would like to, give some input to the students, my students, to follow this thing also, and I'll share this link with our students also. I think this is the input. This is total, the output of waves, where the students are coming, the researchers are coming, teachers are coming, and gaining and having some knowledge from this seminar. So it's all credits go to President Shashi Tiwari ma'am, Professor Shashi Kejriwal sir, and the moderator like you, Kamna. You were very nice, while moderating the things. So thank you very much.
Under the guidance of such able gurus, sir, our students will definitely benefit and move on.
Yes. Maheshwari 30 seconds. I want to take 30 seconds, if you don't mind.
Sir, please.
So I would also pick one comment, from last one, Bamraji, which is the Yogastha Kuru Karmani, being a Karma Yogi, like Pankaj also mentioned. So I think that is very important. And if you think of Gandhiji, our national icon, his whole biography, autobiography is called His Story of Experiments with Truth. So he was a true scientist of human nature, but also used everything that he learned from Vedas and everything that he read, and from other grunts also. So I think if we just follow that and then continue to follow our heart and then continue the research, I think it will be great India and great for the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And it has been a very thought-provoking and successful session, and for that I thank my chairs. And now I hand over the baton to the next moderator of this next session. We have a special session, Dr. Reena Kapoor ji. Now I hand over to you.
Thank you, Kamna ji. Thank you so much. A very good evening to everyone. I welcome you all. As a member of WAVES and moderator of this session, I, Dr. Reena Kapoor, Assistant Professor, Swami Shridharan College, University of Delhi, wholeheartedly welcome you all in this special session on history and culture of Phase 2 of 14th International Conference of WAVES International and 24th International Conference of WAVES India, organized virtually in association with Vyasa Bangalore and Hindu Student Council USA under the title of Impact of Vedic Wisdom on the World Today. It is my privilege to honor to take you all to a thrilling voyage of science and history to unlock many of the locked compartments through the ways our panelists will administer. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you the special guests of this session. The session will be chaired by Shri Dhiru Shahji. He is one of the director and treasurer of WAVES, scholar, researcher of Hindu tradition and scriptures. His area of expertise is basic philosophy, tradition of dharma, history, Vedic dharma, and ancient tradition of India and culture. Apart from being a professional, he is an accomplished educator also. We will also fill our bucket with the nectar through the ruminative orations from Dr. S. Mohan and Dr. S. Kalyan Ramanji, co-director, Saraswati Sindhu Research Center, Chennai. The proposition is formation and essential unity of Bharatiya Bhasha. Next, we have Professor Narayanan Kumar, one of the director, Waves International, and former professor of aerospace engineering, Atlanta, Georgia, who will apprise about a technological countdown approach of historical timeline. The session will be cataplasmed with the keynote speech of Shri Jeffrey Armstrong, whom we know as Kavindra Rishi ji, with a very interesting topic, decolonizing the Gita, English words that undermine Sanatan Dharma culture that need to go. Shri Kavindra Rishi ji is a blogger, consultant, poet, theologist, relation expert, philosopher, teacher of Vedas, and having an expertise in many areas of history and religion. So without taking much of your time, I would like to call our first speaker, Shri Kalyan Ramanji. Over to you, sir.
My name is Kalyan Raman, and the co-author of this presentation is Dr. S. Ram Mohan. We will be presenting about the formation and essential unity of Bharatiya Bhasha, focusing on Meluha, which was the lingua franca of Saraswati Sindhu civilization. Meluha is referred to as Mlecha in the ancient texts of Hindu tradition. An accompanying document is the Indian Lexicon with over 8,000 semantic clusters, which is available online. The link is given there. We have also given our email links. Please do email us in case you need the complete set of documentation and also the PowerPoint slides. The lexicon establishes the reality of Bharatiya Spragbund, speech union, based on Meluha. Many languages of India use cognate words with variant pronunciations. This reality led M.B. Emino, a co-author of Dravidian Etymological Dictionary, to declare in his Annamalai University lecture that there was a common link across language families which point to a linguistic area. A linguistic area means an area where people of various language families interacted culturally with one another and absorb language features from one another and made them their own. This is called a Spragbund, a speech union. This is a beautiful map prepared by Franklin Southworth in his 2005 work, Linguistic Archaeology of South Asia. This map has been adapted by adding Vedic and Mlecha as superimposed components to complete the linguistic area picture of the Indian Bharatavarsha subcontinent, which clearly ranges from Himalayas to Kanyakumari on the Indian Ocean, and from Assam to in the west to Assam in the east to Gujarat in the west and northwest India in the west. So the Sindhu region. See, the network of interactions resulted in this formation of languages. The networks extended from the ancient Near East to the ancient Far East, that is Eurasia and also the Far East Asian countries such as Burma, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and so on. 19th century before Common Era. A beautiful map has been prepared by Pinot, called the Pinot map of Austroasiatic speakers. That's on the top. At the bottom is a correlating settlement structure of Bronze Age settlements of the Northeast India and ancient Far East. It's remarkable that there is a perfect correlation between the language speakers and the Bronze Age sites, presented by Charles Higham in the term Bronze Age of Southeast Asia, 1996 volume. this link between the Austroasiatic speakers of India in Santal Parganas, Asuri, Mundarika, Ho, Santali languages link up with the Mon-Khmer languages of the ancient Far East. This has been proved by scholars of the University of Hawaii, who have conclusively established that the roots of Mon-Khmer are traceable to Santali and Austroasiatic languages in India. We have the extraordinary example of a lost wax technique used for creating these two-spoked wheels in Mehergarh. These are surprisingly dated to 7th millennium before Common Era. What are these wheels? I think we have a good reading based on the Indians' Pragbund, or the Beluga spoken lingua franca. Sark in Pashto is a wheeled carriage. Arkasal is a reverse rendering of the same word as a goldsmith workshop. Arka means copper and gold. Arka also means sun's rays. Then there are spokes. Ara is spokes. Rebus rendering is Ara brass. This is how the Indus script is structured and formed to render rebus the figurative images of these logographs to be read rebus in Beluga language. For example, Yaraka, name of wheel, can be seen in this picture. The rebus rendering is Yaraka, copper, but also Yaraka, metal infusion or molten cast copper. A pair of these can be shown as Dula pair, rebus rendering Dul, cast metal. Thus, cast copper brass castings are indicated by these so-called Mehergarh amulets of bronze. We have anthropomorphs of the men ligated to bovine hindparts. They give an indication of the underlying language of Meluha. The horn person is Koda, horn, rebus rendering, Kod, workshop. Upraised hand is Yaraka, upraised hand, rebus rendering, Yaraka, metal infusion. Arka, copper, gold. Thus, blacksmith workshop or metal infusion signified by this anthropomorph attached to, ligated to a bull's thighs. The bull is Dangar, rebus rendering, Dangar, blacksmith. So the same type of anthropomorph ligated to a bull becomes very commonly used in the Babylonian neighboring interacting areas. Dangar, blacksmith, Dangar, Thakur, blacksmith, Dandro, a contempt term for blacksmith in Nepali. So with horns, and this particular person in Mesopotamia is carrying a flagstaff, which indicates that he is selling his wares in a Utsava Bera. So now we have a Utsava Bera of people carrying flagstaffs proclaiming to the audience that they are prepared to barter transactions for these artifacts and wealth producing articles made by them from their smithy and forge. The gold and copper work, ornament gold work, mineral ore work, and fine gold work, and working in a mint. So we have a parallel metaphor in the performance of the yajna. For example, the Maitrayani Samhita and also Kataka Samhita and Taittiriya Samhita declare that yajna is to be performed for purification of gold, tin, iron, and lead. I will read out the particular portion from the Maitrayani Samhita. Parvatascha me, Hirayascha me, Sikatascha me, Vanaspatayascha me, Ashmacha me, Mruttikacha me, Hiranyamcha me, Ayascha me, Hiranyam, gold, Aya, alloy metal, Sisamcha me, lead, Trapu, tin, Samam, possibly iron, black metal, Lohitayasam, copper, Agnischa me, Apascha me, and so on. So this very clearly shows that the Agniyana Kalpantam refers to the production of these commodities which are wealth producing articles. Meluha. The cognate word is Blecha. Vatsyayana on Vidya Samuddesha uses the expression Blechita Vikalpa, which signify Meluha cipher writing system. listed as one of the 64 arts taught to youth. Decipherment of interscript corpora of over 8,000 inscriptions have been achieved. Inscriptions are seen to be metalwork catalogs by Bharatam Janam, metal caster folk. The word Bharata in Marathi means a factitious alloy of copper, pewter, and tin. Bharatanche Bande means made of such alloys, articles, equipment made of such alloys. Then the word Bharatam Janam is an expression attested by Vishwamitra in the Rig Veda. He says, Vishwamitra se rakshati brahmedam Bharatam Janam. This mantra of Vishwamitra will protect the Bharata people. Rig Veda 3.53.1. So now we can see how the entire language formation and function is presented through a set of hieroglyphs. Here is one good example of a hieroglyph of sign number 342, which is Kandakanka in Santali, which is a rim of a jar. The Kanka is derived from Karnika, related to the ear, or rim of a jar. The rebus rendering is Karnika, scribe, account, Karni, supercargo, Karnika, helmsman, Karnaka, projection on the side of a vessel is Karnika, is also represents a helmsman or Karnadhara. So in rebus rendering in Marathi, Karani, Karnika. In Sanskritam, who is a manager, who is a supercargo of a ship, man responsible for the cargo entrusted to him. So this sign 342 undergoes a number of diacritical markings, which are again themselves hieroglyphs. So if you have a slash, a notch inset into sign 342, it becomes sign 343. That notch signifies khanda. Rebus rendering is khanda, equipment. Similarly, in sign 15, the sign 342 is ligature to a water carrier. A water carrier is kuti. Rebus rendering is kuti, smelter. So is an accountant related to smelter work. So we have a Daimabad seal which shows just the rim of the jar to signify that this is owned by the scribe, the helmsman, and supercargo. This is how the entire structure of the script is able to present us the contours of Meluha with variant pronunciations in various languages of the Indian subcontinent or Bharatavarsha. So we have the variant pronunciations of Konda, a young bull and a bull calf. In a number of languages, you can see the variations that have taken place. Kannada calls it Gonde bull, Telugu Gonda, Konda, Kola language, Naiki, Konda, Gadba, Konde. Then on the Kodia, young bull, in Telugu, Kode bull. So the standard device, as we have seen, is a combination of two parts. The top part is the lathe, second part is the portable furnace. Sangado is the lathe, Sanghata is a caravan consignment. It can also mean Sanghat, Samagri, cargo, collection of implements. The bottom portion is a Kammatamo, a portable furnace. The setting is Kambatam, Kammata, coinage, coin or mint. So this is how the rebus rendering of the interscript with the semantic layering gives us a very clear indication of the life activities of the people of the civilization and gives us a structure of the language, the spoken form of the language that was used in those times. So we have three great artifacts of tin ingots, pure tin ingots of about 25 kilograms each, found in a shipwreck in Haifa in Israel. Surprise, these carry interscript hieroglyphs. For example, on one of the ingots you see the face of a woman, Muh, a human face. Rebus rendering, Muh is an ingot. X signifies Dhatu, cross. Rebus rendering, Dhatu, mineral. The liquid measure is Ranku. Rebus rendering, Ranku, tin. Ranku, Dhatu, Mukha, tin, mineral. Like take a look at the shoe cylinder seal, which is almost a Rosetta stone, which has got an Akkadian inscription, which refers to the shoe as the Eme Balme Luha Ki, interpreter of the Meluha language. The Meluha language interpreted by Shuriyu Ilishu relates to the two travelers from Meluha. One Meluha carrying a goat with a raised hand, another Meluha merchant, his companion, is a lady carrying a kamandalu or liquid measure. So the person carrying the goat carrying a blake, vilaku, copper, eraka, metal infusion. So he is a worker working with copper and metal infusion. Second person carrying a ranku, liquid measure. She is a trader in tin. So tin and copper traders from Meluha are transacting with the Akkadian armorer, who is signified by the crucible symbol on top of the shoe. So the same principle of this ligaturing, same principle of adding information by diacritical markings or ligatures is followed on even on the signs. For example, here are 5 signs of the fish with variations, with modifications, with one fish showing a lid on top, dhakka or adanan is a lid of a top pot. The reverse rendering is dhakka is a bright blazing metal or aduru, an unsmelted native metal. Together, alloy, ayas, aya, fish, reverse rendering, ayas, alloy metal. Similarly, a fish with a slash, dhala. Dhala is a slash. Dhalako is a large ingot. Then a fish with a notch. Notch we have seen, khanda, notch. Reverse rendering, khanda, equipment. Then another fish with fin, magnified. Kambata is fin. Kambata, inlanda. Reverse rendering, kamata, a mint. Similarly, a fish with 4 circumscription strokes of 4 is ganda. Reverse rendering is kanda, equipment. So, IS metal equipment. So, this is how the script form and structure perform to signify Meluha. So, now we are able to postulate based on these tin ingots, which I have presented in an article in the Journal of the Indo-Judaic Journal, that there was an ancient maritime tin route which linked Hanoi in Vietnam to Haifa in Israel. The trade routes passed through the Indian Ocean. So the Mlechita Vikalpa or a Meluha cipher signifies the metalcaster folk creating more than 7,000 inscriptions. Again, as attested by Vishwamitra in the Rig Veda. They are made in the ancient text between Mlechavachas. Both are of the same civilizational area. One are a group of people who speak without any pronunciation mistakes or grammatical mistakes. Ordinary people, chariot drivers, who speak the Meluha form or spoken form. Mlechavachas was so called because of the use of ungrammatical forms. So the evidence of the speech union or the Spragbund is very clearly established in the Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, Munda, Tibeto-Burman families, which constituted the lingua franca of the civilization. The references to Yemeno's formulations on this topic are given here. So what is the speech area? But they were able to interact with one another using pronunciation variants of the same semantic underlying component to be able to converse with one another and transact business of networking of trade transactions. So, for example, Shankar Narayanan very clearly observed there is a significant pattern of repetitions of words, Kandan, Mundan, for example, in Tamil, which is just only referring to odds and ends, bits and pieces, like that. So, this is a very common feature among all the languages of the linguistic area. So, rules for the formation of the Meluha language are also laid down in Bharata's Natya Shastra, which prescribes how a particular person speaks the Prakrit or a particular person speaks the Aryan tongue. So, we have the excellent examples prepared by S.K. Chatterjee on the formation of the Bengali language, and we have the work of Jules Bloch, who talked about the formation of Marathi language. We have the work of Panikar, who talks about the formation of Malayalam language. So all of them identify this common feature of the shared cultural framework of semantics, which get variations in pronunciations. So the evolution of this Spragbund can be indicated very clearly For example, there is a beautiful dialogue that Patanjali has with a chariot driver. Kosya rathasya praveta. Who is the driver of this car? Driver answers, Ayushman Aham Prajita. Sir, I am the driver. Upon which the grammarian accuses him of using an incorrect speech form. Apashabda. The driver retorts that the grammarian knows what should obtain by the rule. Praptigya, but not what is desired. Ishtigna. This term is desirable. Nisheta. Etadrupa. So the different language speakers from different areas of the Indian subcontinent, Bharatavarsha, the Isheta, they liked a particular way of expressing themselves. That constitutes the dialects. That constitutes the lingua franca. Falls into languages as semantic expression takes place with development of new technologies, so on. So there we can definitely demonstrate the presence of Munda of Dravidian into the Indian Veda, similarly of the Indo-Aryan in Dravidian etymological dictionary. I have shown, for instance, the Indian lexicon that out of the 5,400 words of the Dravidian etymological dictionary, as many as 4,000 have cognates in Munda and Indo-Aryan languages. So there is no need for an exclusive dictionary system, though even though there are very beautiful, very eminent, very ancient words in every single language of our country, be it Maithili, be it Bhojpuri, be it Kashmiri, be it Malayalam, be it Tamil or Oriya. So areal differences in speech forms resulted in this speech union, spark bund or linguistic area, which we have already defined. For example, in Cambodia, the pattern of speaking to go was shav. It was in vogue at one point in time. It later on got given up. Because in the course of context, they absorb new words and treat it as their own, make them their own. So phonetic and morphemic evolution and formation of languages such as Marathi or Bengali or Oriya, documented by Yules Block or Sketchatergy or Panikkar, can be good sources for studying. So it was a mechanism whereby wealth producing activities took place in the Agniyana Kalpantam, purification of metals that we have listed in the quotations from Maitreya Samhita and Kataka Samhita. So there is an overlap of bronze and iron ages in the Indian subcontinent and a continuum of metalwork techniques from the days of the Saraswati Sindhu civilization in ancient India. We have now found, thanks to the work of Rakesh Sinha, that 3 sites of Malhar, Lohardiba, Madan al-Kitila and Ganga Basin, evidencing iron smelter work, dated to 1800 before Common Era. So that means, but almost coterminous with the Saraswati Sindhu civilization, working with tin bronzes, iron work was also going on. But not only here, but also possibly in South India, using the Sahyadri range iron ore or the Rourkela iron ore or Dandakaranya Mulangir iron ore of the eastern parts of Orissa and northern Andhra Pradesh. Now, Sangam literature has got a remarkable evidence which talks about the travel from Dwaraka after its submergence by a group of people called Vedir. After 42 generations, after the rule by them in Dwaraka for 42 generations, they moved down south along the coastline and continued their activities with the Saraswati Sindhu civilization. So, for example, when John Marshall says possibly the gold that was used in the civilization was obtained from Kolar, that means there was a network of trade transactions between Kolar and the Saraswati Sindhu civilization, trade centers of Sialkot or Takshashila, Mohenjo-daro, Bildana, Harappa, and so on. We have an attestation from Bodhayana Sauta Sutra, which clearly indicates from the Saraswati River basin, there was movement westwards and movement eastwards. Professor B.B. Law also comments on this document from the Bodhayana Sauta Sutra. Sutra provides evidence of that both Ayu and Amavasu, indigenous Vedic people located in Saraswati Sindhu River basins and who moved west and east. Some of the people who moved eastwards were Videhamatava, who moved to Kashi, and Kolavagana, who moved to Sada, which is called also Karatoya, according to Amarakosha, which is the tributary of the Brahmaputra river today in Bangladesh. So that means there was movement of people from the civilization into these areas during the days of the Rigveda itself, which predates the civilizational dates of the Saraswati Sindhu settlements. For example, in Birdana, we have found Vedic houses with circular pit dwellings that were used by the Vedic people for their settlements. The date of the Birdana and Kunal sites are 7th millennium BC, comparable to the Mehrgarh settlements of 7th millennium before Common Era. So we have got a continuum of Vedic culture and civilization continuing from the 7th millennium BC down to the present times. Language has not vanished. The Beluga terms continue to be used together with the hieroglyphs on tens of hundreds of thousands of Panchmar coins all over India, from China Mint to Ujjain Mint.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we wish to hear more from you about all these your research, and I just wish to thank for sharing this extensive research of Hindu's scripture tradition and educating so minutely the details of an entire civilization within this short time of span. The detail of Bharatiya Bhasha and vocabulary, along with the modern understanding of dialect and linguistic, is genuinely remunerative. I wish to hear more about the Sangam literature also, but I think within the limited time frame, we are just bound to limit. There's a time now to call upon the Vice Professor Kamrat. Over to you, sir. Professor Narayan Kamrat ji.
Namaste. I'm Narayanan Kumar, an aerospace engineer by training and a researcher and professor in my career. Recently, researchers have shown a continuity of civilization from Hanoi to Haifa, Hanoi in today's Vietnam, all the way to Haifa in today's Israel, with a common communication medium, trade, culture, and technology, with the Sapta Sindhu region of Bharatavarsha being the trading center. Very few people, especially in India, seem to be aware of the implications. My aim is to show how we can go back from the Saraswati era, that is from about 4,000 to 7,000 years before the present era, back in time towards 100,000 to 140,000 years before the present era. Long span history. I propose to use techniques that are used in aerospace engineering, both in the science and technology development and in project management aspects. I have been thinking how I might have planned technological developments. If I want something to be ready at a given time, say next February 23rd at 8 p.m., what should I accomplish and when? What do I need to do now? This is the countdown approach. You are all familiar with it from rocket launches, where someone counts 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. That process started years back, maybe with Y-20 or Y-30, when they first planned the mission, it is in years. Down to days when they said D-720, we only have 720 days left. Down to H-23, okay, hours. And then down to T- something in seconds. If any step does not occur, the countdown is stopped and started again only when that step is done, no matter how long it takes. So for every product seen in the market today, or let's say a coconut tree seen today, the planning had to start way back. The development had to start way back. That huge tree today started as a sapling 10 or 15 years ago, and that meant that there were other coconut trees around at that time, so on and so forth. Many things had to come together. from communications to interactions with other evolutionary streams. Today, the pace of innovation is exponential. We all hear about this. So many revolutionary products, disruptive technologies are coming up. The time to replace one technology with a new one is getting shorter all the time. So that means that if I go backwards, it must have taken longer and longer. How can we model that? That is my question. So here I explain the need for such an approach. And I try to present 3 levels of analytical models and consider 3 examples. Okay, now that you have seen this, I'll discuss this in further detail as we go along. Now, you're all aware of the issues with history of technology, the whole field of history and technology. I have discussed what I found in the paper. I'm not an expert on it. I know very little of it. So being ignorant and an outsider, I can say whatever I please. But you can read it for what it's worth. There are some good sources of data there, of course, and also some prior work on technological determinism and evolutionary ecology, and many other such big words and big concepts. But for all that, I don't think I am reinventing the wheel here, as obvious as it may be. And you can read here, well, I don't want to depend on the history of science and technology field as it exists today, centered in the West. They don't have any empathy for us. Why not start with a given discovery and move forward? This encounters in fluid mechanics, if you try to do this, you encounter what is called the Lagrangian instability. You start from one point and it may go in all kinds of directions because of the errors involved. In innovation, there is a thing called the Gartner hype curve, okay, which shows how innovations go through violent oscillations in market acceptance. And he sets out 5 things. One is the innovation trigger. There's something happen to make something happen. And then there's an innovation and it immediately gets published in the newspaper saying, oh, you know, our so-and-so discovered something brilliant. And, oh, you know, that's peak of inflated expectations, followed by the trough of disillusionment when reality hits, or people just don't pay attention. Then comes the slope of enlightenment, which is fairly slow, and then a plateau of productivity. So here, the trouble is that many innovations simply died. So if I start with something that existed sometime and move forward, it may lead nowhere. It might die in the sands of the desert. Instead, I try moving backwards. In brief, I say, if X was observed in 2020, when did it have to be invented at the latest? What other Y, Z, etc. had to exist, and by when? This is a better use of research resources, I feel, because at least we will acquire the competence of the people of 10,000 years ago. I may learn to weave baskets. I don't know how to do that, or mats. And I may learn to make pots with nice inscriptions. That's a tremendous skill. I don't think I'll manage to learn that very well. What is my motivation? There are 3 points of motivation. One is the stunning implications of the Saraswati discoveries. Suddenly, we now have data. Okay, if we are willing to take the time to go and mine through all that and see what they're saying, there's a huge and fast increasing amount of data. The second is, if you look at the history of innovations, this is from the National Science Foundation in the United States, 93% of venture capital funded great ideas die as enterprises within the first 2 years. And these are the ones that were actually funded by these venture capitalists who go through due diligence, etc., etc. So why and how did some survive? This is the real story. And the third part is unhappiness about what I learned in the social studies textbooks as a student. I have a suspicion that they still teach the same stuff half a century later. So I want to explore the ecosystems around Bharatiya civilization. So some things I accept, okay, down to about 140,000 years before the present era. I don't know what happened before that. I don't think I have a really good way of finding out what happened way before that. From there down to about 4,000 before present era, there is a big hole in history, which is what I want to fill. I will propose 3 analysis methods. The first is a method from chemical reaction kinetics. The second modifies that to model flat delays, which are not part of the first model. The third is deliberately chosen from machine language artificial intelligence in order to meet up with ML AI-based classifications of the Saraswati civilization findings, which I hope will come about soon if Indian researchers take interest. So the first one, in chemical kinetics, the conditions for even a simple chemical reaction are as follows. There has to be, incidentally, this is about the only thing on which I have some competence. I do have a PhD in turbulent combustion as it relates to aerospace engineering. So we had to learn this thing and I passed the qualifying exam. I can tell you that. So there has to be a collision between 2 molecules to begin with. It has to be with enough energy or speed to break bonds or overcome a certain level of binding energy. It also has to be at a particular orientation. And after having modeled all these things, there's still a large factor of chance that is unexplained. Perhaps in some future date, they'll figure out it's the spin quantum. I don't know what it might be. Similarly, adoption of an innovation requires many people. They have to communicate, they have to agree, they must have a dire enough need and enough resources to buy it. And then some magic has to occur before they actually open their wallets and buy something. This is the Arrhenius model that explains combustion reactions. It also explains why milk curdles, apparently. I have not checked into that. Okay, it seems to fit the exponential rise of innovation today. So I use the same expression to go backwards and predict the typical time that it took between events. So see these 2 items. I have placed here the Bacterial Cup and the Aranmulla mirror or Aranmulla Kannadi. More on those later. And I placed those at the times when they are reported to have been found. The ones that have been found were dated to those times. Let me put it that way. Okay. The second model, I don't have a slide there, it simply adds a flat time delay to the exponential function. It helps model many things in reality. For example, bureaucratic delays. There's no sense of physics that can explain that. And this is the third method. This figure is from a course I recently took on machine language, so that's about all I know about that. The point is that to reach the eventual output, the inputs came from numerous sources, all connecting to numerous intermediate layers with paths that had different weights, importance, or delays. By iterating back and forth, a best path is identified as perhaps the path of least resistance, but all inputs still contribute to the output. The relationship is typically far too complex for humans to comprehend, but given enough data on which to train, the network becomes increasingly reliable and accurate. The trouble with this is that the machine does not know why the path became the best one. It has no knowledge of physics or chemistry or human behavior. It just has the data. We could construct a rules-based knowledge model for the paths if we knew enough, but I tried that. And as I showed here, it will take a lot of work. I don't have the knowledge. Perhaps as we go along, we should do our best to keep this moving forward. Now let me consider 3 examples. The first is the Aranmulla Kannadi. With a very special combination of copper and tin, it is possible to make a surface that is hard, it resists corrosion, and it can be polished to mirror-like sheen. It is white, although it is 68% copper. Think about that. This mirror was a crucial part of civilization. I claim that this is what turned colored stones and crystalline carbon and gold into precious commodities because people could see themselves wearing these things. Okay, but how did this happen? Aranmula is in Kerala. There is hardly any tin in India. That comes from Vietnam or other parts of Southeast Asia. How did they figure out how to make these very precise alloys? Each experiment involved melting metals and then polishing the mirror very hard. How long did all this take? Next comes the Bacterial Cup. Look at the detail on it. This is a silver cup. Look at the artwork. Drinking was a minor part of its function. You'd almost hate to drink from this, saying, oh my God, I don't want to insult this piece of art. It served to advertise metalwork and art. How long did it take to develop that? I tried to estimate it. And I estimated around 230 years, and no fudging, 233.3 if you want to be ridiculously precise. That's the first cut. Does this make any sense? 233.3 years, that's a long time. Let us put that against that figure that I showed you before. And I see where I put the mirror. And well, there you go. At those times, 4,000 to somewhere around 5,000 before present era, it would have taken about 0.2, somewhere around that. It's not out of the ballpark, so to speak. So I'm setting off fireworks here, celebrating my model, but I had to remember reality. My model was based on totally arbitrary parameters. So this is just the luck of the novice. Okay. There's no knowledge here. But the approach seems to have a little bit of promise. The most amazing thing that I discovered in this process is that of celestial navigation. There is a very, very simple method to navigate, at least in areas north of the equator, just north of the equator, like South India and North Africa. It uses a piece of wood and a string. That's all there is to it. On a clear night, when you can see the stars. But how did they develop this? It meant that they had very sophisticated astronomical science and mathematics, which they then reduced to simple engineering, craftsmanship, and crew training. Somebody did not start with a piece of wood and a string and just look up and invent this. It came from the other way. So what did these people know? So they knew that one never reaches the horizon. They also knew that the sky looks different from different places. So did they not know and did they not figure out that Earth is a sphere? Surely they must have. So here I make the point that these three innovations are very closely cross-linked. Okay, and nothing more than that here. You can read the paper for the details. And it must have led to all kinds of things. So my approach to the long span history of Bharatiya Itihasa realizes that technological advancement is a long drawn out, convoluted, and very uncertain process. Adoption needs a pain point. I'm now throwing out some terms that I learned in 3 months of what the National Science Foundation called the boot camp of customer discovery. It was brutal. In fact, my student and I tried to keep our spirits up by giving names to the instructors based on mythology. We named all the instructors after Rakshasas. There was the Tadaka and the Shurpanaga and Bhagan and people like that. I have to respect those people. They actually managed to teach me a few things. So, pain point. The final value proposition is often very different from the original. It propagates through slow customer discovery with pivots and delays at each step. The correct path has to be complete. Remember our countdown, even one missing step would even invalidate it. So there is a closure check, as we call it in theoretical development. There's one way to see if the answer that we've got makes, it's a sanity check, in other words. When this is done with rigor by researchers in Indian institutions, this process will produce time and space resolved technology maps of the ancient world. At minimum, it will improve understanding of our own ancestors from our own point of view and our traditions and our empathy for them, and of the galaxy of technologies that are woven into our current world. So this is my last slide. The complexity of this massive endeavor is huge, but it is tractable with modern tools such as the internet and machine language, AI processing, artificial intelligence processing, provided that many Indian research institutions participate. This is really a collaborative endeavor. No one person is going to although in reality, much progress is made by a very small team, and then everybody else might get inspired. But this really requires everybody working together, just like our own technology development in the distant past. Traditional archaeology and history of science and technology provide recent artifacts and records. I certainly don't intend to disrespect that. I have suggested 3 levels of analysis: the Arrhenius reaction rate model, a 2-parameter model linked to that, and then back propagation. And on top of all these comes empiricism. You need good interpretation and very careful experimental science on top of this. Initial exploration shows promise. That's all I can say. The Saraswati knowledge base provides crucial linkages and information, which they are developing very hard to build a global picture going back at least 10,000 years before the present era. Examining how communities reached a given level of capabilities at a given time will lead to the preceding 100,000 years and so on and so forth to the 2.65 million years before present era presumed origin of humans or human precursors on Earth. So I hope somebody thinks about this and starts some work and organizing things on, perhaps we could organize a conference on this at some point much later when there are many people working on it. So thank you, and again, namaste. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Kamyad. Definitely finding about the Saraswati Valley's role as trading hub in a global civilization dating back over 7,000 years and a survey of the history of science and technology, which clarify the need of a technological school of research, how knowledgeable the ecosystem of our ancestors, which is equally of the same use even in the modern era also. I also agree with 2 of your points, which you just gave very quickly, about the realization that tech advancement is a long drawn out convoluted process, and also the correct path has to be complete. So I again would like to thank you for such an amazing paper and this amazing research sharing with us. I don't want to remain more in between of you and our keynote speaker, Shri Kavindra Rishi, whom I also met during the several of the WAVE conferences, and it's always an honor for us to hear more and more from him. So I would like to call Shri Kavindra Rishi on the dais. Over to you, sir.
Namaste. My dear esteemed guests and friends, it is my great pleasure to be speaking with you today about decolonizing the Bhagavad-Gita and why English words that undermine Sanskrit meanings and Vedic culture must be removed from the translation process. When the English decided to colonize India and translate Bharat's sacred Sanskrit texts to English, they knowingly or unknowingly were undermining the great culture of Bharat. There is not a translated Vedic text on the market today that isn't guilty of using this mistranslated Sanskrit. Even the sincerest Sanskrit scholars do not know English with enough precision to correctly solve these many translation issues, and thus they unknowingly repeat the Oxford colonizing rhetoric. I know. I did the same thing at first. Over the last 10 years, while translating a new English version of the world's most translated and mistranslated Vedic text, the Bhagavad-Gita, I undertook the task to remove all the colonial, Western, or Christian distortions. Words like Lord, heaven, hell, sin, soul, many gods, religion do not belong in any explanation of the Vedic Sanatana Dharma. And there were many more. I'm certain that the time has arrived for a reassessment of translating all Vedic texts into the English language, with attention to the correctness of the words used in the translation process. I also propose that the message in the Gita is a universal message, which may have landed in Bharat, but its message is clearly meant to reach all of humanity. To reach humanity, it needs to be accessible in the clearest English possible, and of course, in many other languages. The English word translation is derived from Latin and has two components, trans, or across, and latio, to carry. This process of moving meaning from one language to another was brilliantly described by the well-known linguist Umberto Eco in his book, Mouse or Rat, Translation as Negotiation. There, he gives the examples that the word rat and mouse are represented by only one word in many European languages. When this dilemma occurs with nouns representing objects, it is troublesome to the translator. But when it happens with subjective terminology, words very dense with meaning, the difficulty of carrying complex meanings from one language to another is much more problematic. Linguists refer to this dilemma of the density of meaning in language as fat or skinny words. In English, the word pizza is a skinny word with little ambiguity, whereas the word love is a fat and very dense word with many nuances of meaning according to its usage. The word love is intrinsically vague in English and therefore requires considerable accompanying words to illuminate its many nuances of meaning. This word love is used in English to describe many situations, objects, and beings, and thus the meaning is obscure. Do we love pizza the same way we love our friends and family? Yet we use the same word. To add to the irony, the English word love came originally from the Sanskrit word lobha, or greed. So without other modifiers, the meaning of love is not intrinsic to the word, and therefore does not have a clear and specific meaning when it is used in a translation of other words whose meaning is more precise. I think you get my drift. And speaking of drift, one must also consider the other big issue, and that is of linguistic drift. English is especially susceptible. Think of Shakespeare's language. No one can understand it now. But Shakespeare did introduce 1,000 words into the English language to smarten it up. Over time, linguists also added Greek and Latin words to English for the same effect, especially in scientific subjects. It is also the reason why words like gay, cool, and hip no longer mean what they originally meant just a few years ago. This is the reason why there are two kinds of dictionaries in the English language. One is called a usage dictionary, and the other is referred to as an etymological dictionary. Remember, all words in a language have a history. They came from somewhere, and often they are the modified or mispronounced words from the language that preceded them, from which they were borrowed or stolen. Most English speakers do not even know of etymological dictionaries and confuse the current everyday usage of a word with its original and probably now obscured meaning. I am proposing that the historical moment has arrived for a reassessment of translating all Vedic texts into English language. entirely decolonized, and with precise attention paid to the correctness of meaning of those fat Sanskrit words. And we must do our best to combine as many English words or phrases as are necessary in the definition to make these dense words understandable to the reader. I also propose that the message in the Gita is a universal message, which may have landed in Bharat, but its message is meant for all of humanity. Now that I've explained the problem, let's talk about the process of finding a solution. I have just spent the last 10 years working on a new book, a decolonized translation of the Gita called The Bhagavad-Gita Comes Alive, a radical translation. In the first 3 years, I thought I was just doing a clearer translation, not unlike the rest. But then I found an etymological dictionary which took the English words all the way back to Sanskrit roots, called Origins by Eric Partridge. It literally set my project back for years, as it made me realize the extent of the mischief that the first Christian English-speaking scholars had injected knowingly and unknowingly into the so-called meanings of the Sanskrit words, when they started carelessly translating Sanskrit words to supposed English equivalents. Part of the problem is the complexity of Sanatana Dharma concepts that do not even exist in the Christian or Western worldview. After all, modern science and the three Abrahamic religions do have one thing in common. They believe in only one tiny lifetime. So how were they to explain karma, multiple universes, Brahman, male and female divines, or an antiquity that stretched way beyond their limited conception of existence and reality? Words like Svarga became heaven, Atma became soul, Naraka became hell, Dharma became religion, Ishta became Lord, Pap became sin, Mantra became prayer, Archavigraha became idol, Devas and Devis became the many gods, or worse, the demi-gods. And I could go on. But before I begin, I want to say, in service of all the great acharyas from whom we learned the Vedic Vidya, I bow to you all in dedication and seva. Let me explain why some of these words are so inappropriate and sometimes outright offensive and undermine Sanatana Dharma and must be removed from our texts and teachings. Let's take first the word God and the many gods. What exactly does the English word God mean? If you consult an etymological dictionary, you'll see that it came into English from Dutch as Gut, which came from German, Gutam, and from the Sanskrit, where it originated, Hutam. Brahmarpanam, Brahma Agnau, Brahmahutam, the smoke arising from an Agnihotra Yagya, aka, in the words of the Christians, a pagan fire sacrifice. And yet that word, the smoke from the offering, is the root and proper meaning of the Christian word God. Therefore, ask yourself, is it a translation? Is it translatable? Ask yourself, is it translatable as Bhagavan? Is it a substitute for Bhagavan? And as you probably know, the word Bhagavan is described in the Puranas as having 6 specific characteristics, or bhagas, and Van is the one who possesses them. There is no resemblance to the two words, except faintly the concept of supremacy. Therefore, God is not a synonym for Bhagavan and should never have been used in the Bhagavad-Gita. Next is idol and deity. The word idol comes from the Greek ideia, which comes from the Sanskrit videya or vidya, or became eventually idea in English. But idea is ideal, and ideal in person is your idol. Do you see how confused and jumbled it is? Calling the devas and the various deities idols by the Abrahamic religions is their complete lack of understanding of etymology, and that each of those depictions, each of those deities is in fact an ideal, a being, but leads to ideal behavior in humans and gives credit where credit is due in the administration of the universe. The next is Lord. Oh, this one is wonderful. Lord is from the Old English haflard and haflady. Haflard means the landlord on the estate in England who has peasants working for him, and haflady is his wife. So this gives us the paired words Lord and Lady. Lord and Lady also meant loaf lord. Haflard is loaf. So these are the two, the lady who bakes the bread and the lord of the estate, of the manor, who guards the bread and gives it out to the peasants. This is the actual meaning of Lord, one who distributes bread to the peasants. And you'll notice that it's the key word in one of the most important, if not the most important, Christian prayer, the so-called Lord's Prayer. So now tell me, is bread maker and bread distributor the meaning of the Sanskrit word Isha, Ishta, Devata? Is that really what they mean? Is it a synonym then? Not at all. And finally, let's look at the word soul and Atma. The word soul is S-O-L originally, and it means the sun in Latin. So that luminous planet in the sky is Sol. So then the word was used to describe that part of us which is luminous. Well, that's not too far off, you might say. But actually, Atma is described in great detail. You remember that souls cannot reincarnate. They only have one life. So please tell me, what did they do wrong? Because somehow they were thrown out of heaven. And they could go to hell for what they do in one life. So, are they really like the Atma? Not at all. Because the Gita and all the Vedic texts say, you can't burn it, you can't destroy it, you can't cut it, it doesn't die, it can't die, it's immortal, it goes from body to body, it's on a long journey of knowing and experiencing and gathering experience on its own, which is noble and beautiful in the Dharmic culture. So should we call Atma soul? Not at all. In fact, the word Atma eventually became the Latin atomic, atome, which means you can't cut it. Atome, uncuttable. It turns out the atom was. Even the word atom comes from the word Adam and Eve. And Adam is Atma, and Eve is Jiva. You know, the Jiva Atma. All these travesties of translation and misunderstanding do no justice to the depth of meaning of the Vedic philosophy, and yet they have been made synonymous, which is entirely inaccurate. To summarize, these are the 5 things I did in this translation of the Bhagavad-Gita. Number 1, I removed the toxic, colonizing English words. Second, I left certain essential Sanskrit words that do not have English synonyms in the verses, with a brief meaning defined within quotes. Third, I added a comprehensive glossary of those Sanskrit words for the reader to further understand more complex meanings, never using a one-to-one word definition. Fourth, I clarified the English words used in the verses so they do not interfere with the Sanskrit meanings of the text. And finally, fifth, there are no purports. It simply reads as a smooth conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, as if the reader is there listening. My vision is that over the next few years, this effort will lead to injecting hundreds of new Sanskrit words into everyday English usage with their proper understanding, not the colonized version, just as Latin and Greek were used to smarten up English. Sanskrit, the mother language of both Greek, Latin, and all their derivatives, is powerful, and it can be used to increase the dharmic literacy of the global English-speaking communities. There are millions of inspired yogis who are not born in India and have seriously taken up the Vedic Sanatan Dharma, and now they are starting to learn Sanskrit. It would be a shame if the Hindu community does not lead that movement to explain Sanskrit and Sanatan Dharma using proper English and correct Sanskrit. Given the addition of these new Sanskrit words, everyone will have the opportunity to speak and perfect the qualities and dharmic characteristics that are so needed in our modern world. Since Hindu children are using and being educated in the English language, I propose that this Bhagavad-Gita comes alive, a radical translation, will offer the clarity and correct understanding of the Vedic culture, and will give the next generation an understanding that they can be proud of, and it will inspire their own personal development for the rest of their lives. The Bhagavad-Gita comes alive is radical because it signals a new era in translation of the Vedic knowledge. And so, my beloved friends, Uttishta, Uttishta, arise. As Bhagavan said to Arjuna, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this year's WAVES conference. Pranams, pranams, dandavat pranams. Hari Om Tat Sat.
My sincere thanks to you, sir, for taking the point so nicely. I do agree that the translation distorted Indian scriptures and the other religious texts. Definitely these interpolations were deliberate. And no doubt, the pre-arranged attempt to defame Hindu stardom. Now, I would like to invite the chair of this session. Before that, there is a question from, if we can take this question. Before that, there is a question from Kavindra Rishi ji. And the question is, what are some good ways to scale up the propaganda of the right interpretations of these words and concepts around the world?
Well, it's necessary to make etymology a part of all second language learning, just as it is the very basis of Sanskrit. In Sanskritam, the dhatus are the source of the meaning, the 2012 or so roots that make Sanskrit the precise language that it is, which does not drift over time. This understanding has to be made into a parallel process of understanding the etymology of the language that the Sanskrit is being translated into, so that the words don't interfere with one another, and the Sanskrit vocabulary becomes an addition to all the world's languages. This is how eventually what I call the Vedic world view will be represented by Sanskrit terminology, just as scientific terminology. This muscle in my arm is called extensor digitorum profundus. That's just Latin. Without Latin, English science would be very stupid. So without Sanskrit, the world cannot have a wider view and cannot understand the view of the Vedic knowledge. And of course, the Abrahamic religions have purposely interrupted this process during colonization. So I would propose we're in the decolonizing era right now, and it is a Vedic renaissance. And that is why yoga has spontaneously gone around the world. And this is the next task that I hope to work with the entire Indian community in perfecting.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite one of the director, Professor Dr. and the chair of this session. I'm really very sorry, Dr. Deity, who is quite dedicatedly contributing in this way for the growth, for the upgrading this platform. I would like to invite you, sir, for your expert comments, as well as because the time, we have the time, so I would also like if we can have, I would like to ask you if we can have some discussion.
Namaste. Thank you for inviting me and becoming a chair to this session. It's been a very exciting thing, and I've just been listening to 3 speakers. All of them, I've known them for years together, and they have been sort of amazing the way they have been working sincerely. When I look at Kalyan Ramanji, he has been attending the Waves conference for years together, and his contribution in Saraswati civilization has been just unbelievable. Sorry, I think I got interpreted by somebody. But anyway, the question that I would like to thank all the 3 speakers who have done an excellent job in trying to get the history of the Bharatiya civilization. Dr. Kalyan Ramanji's paper on the formation and essential unity of Bharatiya Bhasa Mehula, Lingua Franca Saraswati Sindhu civilization. And he takes the thing to the 25 bhasas or languages in the Saraswati Basin, which is sort of eye-opening, because I think when I speak Gujarati, it has a lot of commonality with the Sanskrit, and I'm sure it's same thing with the Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam. So we come to the conclusion very clearly that over a period of time, the entire Saraswati civilization, the way it developed, it took many years, and how the system moved from one to another. And you have a question that comes up, is the language and culture had been fused for centuries on the Indian soil, and how did it happen? And there are sort of steps that has to be taken to go back into the years, or how the people moved from one to one place, because at that particular time, there were no cars, there were no aeroplanes, there was nothing. It was a sort of an agricultural society. And slowly, the development of the guilds took place, metalworking, people started navigating, going to various places and trading. And that's what exactly I think Saraswati civilization has come to that. So I look at the trade that took place between India and the Roman Empire. And it's surprising that Romans used to import so much of material, particularly spices, chemicals from India, that they owed a lot of gold to India. And that the only thing they could give is gold. So you can imagine the way the things worked in those days. And slowly, that civilization spread throughout the world. And I've been to all the places in Southeast Asia, like Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and you see the beautiful temples, you meet the people, and surprisingly, all of them, they understand that Sanskrit was the basic language, and from there, their languages have come. So, whereas this is what is not sort of taken for granted in the Western community, because that's what we have been told is basically about the Greeks and the Romans, and that's what the civilization starts. So it's going to take a lot of years, research work, and Kalyan Ramanji, I really bow down to you for the work that you have put in, and an excellent work, and I hope that eventually we may be able to sort of prevail in the Western world also, in setting that it is the Indian culture, the Indian civilization, which has been brought to the world at large and through the Vedic system. The next one, of course, is the Professor Comrade Narayan, whom I have known him for years together. He's been a personal friend of mine. He is, though he's an aerospace engineer, he has been very keen on trying to understand Hinduism, and he has written a book on Hinduism also for the people who don't know much about Hinduism. So his methodology is different, that he's trying to tell us that, well, archaeology or astronomy that we've been using, or literal scriptures for evidences to suggest the civilization history. He is suggesting the method, which is something new, that why don't we go back into the system where a particular product which is being to be marketed, how it develops, how many years it takes, and what happens. I'm myself in business, and I know that if I have to sell something to the United States from India or from anywhere in the world, how much time it takes me to develop that market, it will be surprising. Because I have a company which wants to market their product from India, and it took me about 5 years to convince the people that this is the product that you require, which you have been using, and we can modify and do research work on it. So that's how this situation develops. So this is in a modern time. Now just think about the time which he's talking about, 10,000, 15,000, 150,000 years back. It's not easy. It must have taken years before any product can be developed, it can be marketed, and people consume it. And they say basically that necessity is the mother of invention. And when people see more and more, then people want to have more and more of it. And that's how situation develops. So Narayanji, you've done an excellent job. And we look forward to having more and more of this kind of a talk, which is very important. And as Jeffrey G. Armstrong, I have known him also for a long time. He has attended most of the WAVES conferences, and I respect him for his scholarship, his dedication to Hinduism, and what he has written for years together. And he speaks very, very clear on the situation. I myself have been reading a lot of books written by our gurus in English. Some of them are famous. And when I see those books where they mention Lord, God, soul, this is very common. Every Hindu in India, I know, but whoever I know, all of them, they use these words very commonly. It's unfortunate that we have not told our people that these words have no meaning. Soul cannot be translated. God is not the real God, what we mean. And so I think the time has come, in my opinion, that we need to decolonize ourselves, our mind. The British, when they came in, what they saw, and they realized that it would not be possible for us to rule this country so long as the Vedic civilization is so powerful, and people are not going to convert to Christianity, and we will not be able to rule them. So they had to get hold of a German guy, Max Muller, to translate Rigveda and other scriptures, which he did. He was paid about 10,000 pounds, sitting in Oxford, and he translated all this Veda. And then he wrote to his wife, Victoria, saying that today I have achieved my goal, that from now onwards, the Hindus will give up their Vedas, which are, primitive, barbaric, and so they will convert to Christianity. So this, you can imagine what was the objective behind the decol of the people, the way the British wanted to rule, and they did it. Besides, of course, the way, as I mentioned earlier, that India was probably the richest civilization in the world till 1000 AD. Its GDP was about 34% of the world GDP. And then subsequent to the Islamic invasion from 700 onwards to about 1700, the GDP came down to about 22%. And subsequently, from the British time, the GDP came down when they left in 1947, it was about 3%. So you can imagine the loot of wealth, destruction of the entire civilization, the entire society. And by the time 1947 came, we became the third world country, poorest country, ignorant people, illiterate people. Now just imagine. So the time has come for we Indians have to stop saying sir and madam or ma'am, which is wrong. This is nothing but a colonized mindset, and it must start from the top, and then eventually it will percolate down to downside. So friends, once again, I don't want to take much time. I think the time has come that we need to discuss more on these issues, and looking at those papers, let's have more discussion on this issue again. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, sir. I just, if you will allow us, is it possible that like the paper by Narayanan Kumar ji and the paper by G Armstrong ji, all the papers were quite brainstorming. And as a student of humanity, it's absolutely new for me to know more and more about it. And I genuinely wish to know more and more about it, especially the Saraswati civilization, which Professor Narayan presented or described. And about this interpolation, I must say that as a student of these Vedic studies, I'm still working on these interpolations and the distortion of Indian scriptures and Indian texts. So I just have a question with the, related with this topic to Professor G Armstrong ji. We know that in Hindu scriptures and Hindu texts were interpolated a lot, and these were the deliberate attempts. The interpolations were absolutely, the distortions were absolutely deliberate. We know. We also, we are having this realization that yes, we should have to do something for that. We should try to retranslate it. The need of the hour is to retranslate these texts. But can you suggest us the way how to reach to the general mindsets? Because as a scholar, it's easy to understand or grasp these things. But if we talk about the other people, the common masses, how you will suggest to reach to them, or how you will suggest to make them aware about this loss, about this interpolation or this distortion?
Great question. Often when I'm talking to yoga students who are from outside the Vedic culture, I'll start with a question. I say, raise your hand if you have a cell phone. And of course, they all raise their hand. And I say, yes, of course, it's called your body. It's made of cells, and it's wirelessly connected to everything. You just don't have a user's manual. You haven't been told how to link, that's yoga, to make that link. You don't know how to make the uplink. So if you wanted someone to do that with a product, you wouldn't give them 1,000 vocabulary words. You'd give them 50 or maybe 75 and say, you need these words to use your cell phone. So where we need to begin, in my opinion, is with the Hindu youth, with the necessity of them learning 100 Sanskrit words at a certain level, and then 100 more at another level, and 100 more at another level. And I say this to all of my non-Hindu, but becoming Hindu students who've come in from the outside like I did, learn these words first. You must know Brahman. You must know Prakriti. You must know gunas. You must know doshas. And to tell you the truth, Dr. Kapoor, I have never met someone from India who started out telling me about the gunas, the doshas, the Atma, Brahman, the simple subjects of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad-Gita. No one has been told how to begin explaining their culture with 50 simple
Sanskrit words clearly explained that don't have synonyms in English. And if we do this right now at the school level throughout the world where Hindu students are learning English, then they will add Sanskrit to the English language. And when they speak, they'll say, I have to define this for you, or you won't understand it. Here's a new vocabulary term. It's called Prakriti. It's called samsara. And this is my proposition. Start with 100 key Sanskrit words that sketch out the worldview of the Sanatana Dharma culture. Everyone in the world, in the Hindu community, should use those to define themselves. And then we'll have the beginning of introducing Sanskrit into English and of a renaissance of explaining ourselves accurately.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. About this, this session is open for the question and answers. Is there any question from the audience? Well, Professor Narayanan Kumar, I just wish to know more about your research in this area, because I got a chance to be in few of the conferences related with Saraswati River and the finding of Saraswati River in the civilization and the, such research. I would like you to please, if you can, tell us something more about this research of yours.
So I am the wrong person, but as a student, I can comment on this. Everything I have learned from this came from reading the papers in the Waves proceedings, starting from the first one. I started with Professor B.B. Lal's papers and Professor Kalyanaraman's papers. And then I went and searched on my own for some of these things, and it made sense. See, for example, as I understand it, so I too have studied, I passed SSLC, so I have heard about Indus civilization, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, which are now called Pakistani civilization by them. It's good that they are taking pride in that. But anyway, it was a stunning realization. And my mother has told me many times that there were 3 rivers meet at the Triveni Sangam. The Ganga and Yamuna are visible and the Saraswati is underground. And I said, yeah, right. You know, in 1974, after the first nuclear explosions were conducted, ordered by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, the rest of the world was very upset with India, of course, and the United States redirected the Landsat satellite, apparently, which was focused on the ground. They redirected them so that it would keep flying every day or whatever over the Pokhran area and take as good images as they could of that region. That is where apparently they said, haha, look at those, there's a clear imprint of an ancient river there, exactly where the Saraswati was said to be by the people who read the scriptures. Then they also sent some people on the ground to dig wells and extract the water to see. So, the interest of the United States was to see if you could detect any cracks and craters and things like that from the nuclear explosion, to estimate the power and to estimate the technology level that India had reached. So they also dug wells and tried to extract the water and tested that to see if there were, they tested the tritium content or whatever to see, again, nuclear residue. But what they found was that that water was not at all recent. It was thousands of years old. So it was not from recent rains or something. So it had been left behind by something. So this was the stunning proof that all this, whatever they were seeing in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa was just a far extreme. It's not where the Aryans came barreling down the Khyber Pass and Bolan Pass in their horse-drawn, whatever it was. So I discovered this only very recently. I should say within the past 10 years. And I'm ashamed to some extent because, but I had really, we're all busy doing whatever we are doing. So since then, I have been trying to learn whatever I can. My command of Sanskrit although I was first in my class at the SSLC. No criticism of my teachers, and actually my mother insisted that I learn a bit. I cannot read serious textbooks, so I have to depend on what the gurus here tell me. So this is an endeavor that I hope many people undertake, and I count myself as one of the lay people, so not a big researcher in these things. The knowledge is out there. Look at the proceedings of the Waves conferences as a starter. Fantastic papers. Okay, so that's all I really have to say about this. Everything else, what I'm doing now is suggesting that more people take an interest in this. They don't have to become Vedic scholars and devote their PhDs to studying Vedas. They can do it as part of AI research or whatever other research. And they have a role in understanding if there is some mechanism to coordinate and bring that knowledge into the central problem of trying to understand our own history. I hope that's an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. There is a question from Jeffrey G. Has Kavindraji considered increasing the scope of this wonderful research and doing some kind of panel discussions with other similar work like Rajiv Malhotra's Sanskrit non-translatable?
First step in this process was to set an example by translating the Bhagavad-Gita. It took 10 years, but in that process, I removed all of the colonizing terminology to set an example as I believe the first Vedic translation that does not have any of that colonizing language. Then I left 100 Sanskrit words in the verses so that the reader must get a Sanskrit vocabulary while reading the Gita. And then I clarified the English so that it could all work together. If as a beginning this book is read by everyone and they agree with the premises and see the clarification that occurred, then we next need to have a committee of the best Sanskritists and the highest level English users like myself and have that team work together, because this has never happened. So far, translations have been by individuals doing the best they could, and we all benefited from those acharyas and their pioneering efforts, setting aside the ingenuine scholars in the West. But the sincere ones from Bharat opened this renaissance. But at this stage, if we put the best Sanskritists with the best English speakers, we can have a revolution. We'll have 1,000 Sanskrit words in English within 20 years. And the entire civilization will go back into blossoming mode, because we have to reprogram ourselves and the world. The problem right now in the world is that we need to reprogram it with the greater vision of the Vedic Vidya. To do that, we need to make a concerted linguistic effort to do translations into all the languages. And this is the way that the Vedic knowledge will now become understood correctly and become the new currency in our world.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Though Dr. Shah has already advised to leave sir and madam and to come out from this colonial mindset, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm again using these words because we are in so much in practice of all these words. It will take some time to come out from all these things, definitely. But I wish to hear more from you also, because since you are one of the directors, treasurer, and in this Waves journey, your contribution is, I mean, I'm too small to talk about all these things. So we wish more about all these, your observations and your journey, sir.
Sorry to interrupt you, Reena ji. Can you please all panelists on your videos that I can click a picture?
Yeah, sure, please.
I request all panelists please on your videos.
Okay, probably enough time for taking picture. Can I ask you a question before Dhiru Bhai says something?
Yeah, please.
I
Please,
too
sir.
ask.
So I want to ask this question to Narayanji. Narayanji, your model talks about chemical molecules and extends beautifully in predictability. But one has to assume the molecule and the man will be the same in some sense. We need to kind of translate the behavior of molecule and man. How, because that will be probably very important for the accuracy of what historically we are trying to, I think you are trying to achieve, and more people to get involved. So that's one question, but what other challenges you think are there so that we can find what kind of people can be invited into this, your effort that is really very, very beautifully being done.
So thank you very much. So I don't propose this molecule model as something that will yield very good answers. It models some parts of this process, which are random and chance encounters and things like that, which have some meaning. If you look at product development or anything, many times, or even if you come up with a new concept, many times you are still just floating in vacuum like molecules. Okay, so people feel like they are, there's nothing out there, and then one day there's a chance encounter and something happens. Then it goes further from there. There is the information. I mean, the idea that information transfers through molecular interactions, which is a very important thing in gas kinetics. And that is quite true. Although people communicate now through the internet and all these things, it is some kind of interaction between discrete entities that leads to something. So at least that can be used from there. So like that, I think people will discover the points of agreement or disagreement as they go much deeper into it. And I really have not. I was just intrigued by all these people talking about this exponential rise of this and exponential rise of that. And in my mind, the exponential rise is the rise of reaction rate that leads to an explosion or a flame. The entire flame occurs within a very, very short time and a very, very thin distance. This happens because of this Arrhenius model. So I said, okay, what happens if you look backwards? Okay, it must have taken longer and longer. And has anybody thought about the use of that when almost nothing was happening? Okay, in terms of innovation, you can say it was not that nothing was happening. It was taking hundreds of years or thousands of years. And I realized that everybody's talking about these artifacts found at this time, which shows that the Indus Valley people knew how to build whatever. And I say, wait a minute, for that to have been seen then, somebody knew these things very long ago beyond that. So you cannot judge the level of knowledge of a people by what you see at a discrete point of time. You really have to think backwards. That has larger significance for the Vedas. So people argue about when the Vedas were written or whatever based on this and that. But I have to ask why the Vedas were written. And if you listen to Kalyanaraman ji very carefully, you can almost say that the Vedas were packaged in knowledge given to people who were going on trading missions, probably never to return. And what was the way to package this knowledge? It had to be memorized. So there's a lot of things that you can come out with that. So it's not like somebody just sat down on the banks of the Indus at Mohenjo-daro and wrote down something, whereas they had been burning books all the way getting there. So these are the kind of thought processes that I want to bring out there, and that's all I have reached. I do not have a really good model that will come from many PhDs, and I'm certainly glad that you're thinking about the kinds of people we have to bring together to take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again,
sir. Professor is all right. I just wanted to say that I'm so happy.
Better rather than to say sir.
I think in India, there should be a rule saying, do not say sir. Yes, it's respectful, all those things. I think we get respect in American universities, well, at least some of the time. They call you professor or Dr. K or much worse things that are written on the walls. But I know that I'm being referred to. That's all right. Okay, I think this is a very important point.
Definitely, definitely. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Shashi ji.
I am trying for the last
I'm trying my level best to correct
and I
it.
don't know how to write question answers in this section. So I was raising hand all the time. So a small question, but that is giving trouble to my mind. That is from Professor Komarath. So you have given the illustration or the example of coconut. So I'm thinking, why coconut? Because in literature, if a poet or an author says something, it shows the background or what to say of his mind. So is it, it takes long time to grow coconut or it is from your native place?
Well, all of these, how are these images selected? You browse the net and you happen to see something and something clicks in your brain and say, hey, that illustrates the point that I've been trying to make there. And I know that, the coconut tree takes 15 years or 20 years to come up to full size. And it cannot just come up there unless it grew from that. There is no other way. Okay. So this is why I use that. And yes, I am familiar with it. So yeah, that's all there is to it.
It has a reason. It has a reason.
Dr. Reena Kapoor Mahodaya, ek sawal aur. One can I ask you one more?
Sure, Professor Balramji.
Would like to
Mahodaya ji, Mahodaya.
Mahodaya and Mahodaya Sriman and everybody cannot be Srimati.
Srimati.
Everybody cannot be that. So, I think we need to discuss that, why only married women are known as Srimati, not the one. I mean, anybody can be Srimati, right? Anybody who has a higher enlightened view should be Srimati. So anyway, I wanted to ask this question, and I think very relevant to Kavindra ji, because, we are trying to use the words and translate them as to, what they mean. I mean, what exactly Srimati means, we need to find out rather than simply saying somebody who is married is Srimati. There must be a reason why somebody is called Srimati when they are married, whereas the men are still known as Sriman even before they are getting married. So I think there may be some reason, but I think I wanted to go back to the question that was asked to you about, having a panel. It's, I think, absolutely great idea. Not only for that a panel, but also what Narayanan ji is saying. I think we should start identifying some people and start having some brainstorming as to what it is, because I think if we start our own a label of projects and discussions and being right or wrong about it also, rather than have somebody else giving a stamp, I think so that is always a good way to move forward. But what I noticed, the question was that having a panel with Rajiv Malhotra, because he just published a book on Sanskrit non-translatable, and your is also the same, except that it is applied to a particular text. And from education point of view, whenever you learn something in a context, it sticks more. So this is not a criticism. I mean, Rajiv Malhotra is a good friend. He will be speaking, and he's done a fantastic job. But to answer that question and to have this debate, I think we should have not only whatever non-translatables are, but also being translated properly in the context, because that will stick more than if we just remember a bunch of things, which I'm sorry to sometimes criticize Sanskrit. I love Sanskrit. This is not like, and I wasn't the number one in the class, Narayanan, but nevertheless, I love Sanskrit. And so it is not a criticism of Sanskrit, but Sanskrit scholars have done a marvelous job of keeping the tradition and remembering a lot of things, but then they just only remember things. They need to be applied, and which is where I think the distinction is, and I think we need to have that debate. What do you think of that?
Yes, we're refining the language as we go. So non-translatable was to get the message across that the Sanskrit words do not have equivalents in English. Because of the nature of Sanskrit, because some words have 10 levels of meaning, you cannot know the whole word in any English combination of words that's a single definition. But the first 3 layers of meaning of a Sanskrit word can be translated. Translatio means to carry across. The question is, how much of the Sanskrit word's meaning did you carry across into the language you're landing in? So each language will be different, English, French, Spanish, all with their own unique dilemmas in bringing the language across. But English is the most chaotic language, so the research on it is most interesting. But when you find the correct words, there's not an equivalency, but you can use 50 English words to describe one Sanskrit word. And if you're careful, you might have learned 5 new things about that Sanskrit word that are accurate and correct when you use them in English. And this is what has not been done yet. And this is next if we're going to make some progress in bringing the Vedic knowledge around the world in all languages. Same process will be carried out.
If I can make a brief point, the Indian History Awareness Research people who are based in Houston as well as other places had actually volunteered to take the lead in setting up some sort of panel on the things that I was talking about. We did not, we backed off from trying to do that in conjunction with this conference, saying it's not the right time yet. But we are very interested in doing that, and I think they will really help. And that's a group of people who have a broad spectrum of expertise. They are the ones who told me what is actually being done today in history of science and technology. So they've been very helpful. So there's a start, and perhaps we could build on that.
Are you talking about Rajvedam?
No, this countdown method and all this, the technology, using the technology level to understand the past. So they were very interested in that.
I have a query. If Shri Dhirushaji, please, you can answer my question. As an academician, my concern is like it took 10 years, almost 10 years to Jeffrey ji to translate, to pick out the words, translated words from Gita, and then to find out such words and to pick out those words. So if it took such a long time just to correct one text, so my concern as an academician and a student of literature is that, don't you think that it will take too much time to correct all these texts? So what may be the, what should be the process through which we can speed up this process and this purification of Indian scriptures? What can be the process? If you all of the intellectuals can suggest any of the process, I think it will somewhere satisfy my curiosity also.
That's a great question. Well, the problem, first of all, was that I was the pioneer. And so I had to do all of the heavy lifting of it, and I kept going down the rabbit hole and finding more crazy words and more words that had strange meanings in English. And so the Gita was the test case, because if there's a single book that needs to be made clear, it is obviously the Bhagavad-Gita, because Bhagavan gave this at the beginning of what we now consider a much more difficult time. But if we had a committee, and I had no funding, and I did it in my spare time while teaching and being an astrologer and doing many other things, and I've researched thousands of Sanskrit words and English words. So that 10 years was me going way down the rabbit hole, that I came back out and said, if I do the Gita, at least I'll set an example. And then everyone can see the process. And then perhaps this will get funded and it'll move forward. but I've just been one unfunded, not a professor, no grants, no university, just doing this with all my might for 10 years. So good question. And yes, I have stress marks to prove it.
Shri Dhiru Shahji, I wish to hear more from you also.
Well, I think funding, I think what he's saying very true, that the funding is a big problem, particularly when it comes to funding the intellectual type of things, when you want to do some work on your religion. The only time the Hindus in general are making a statement, they make money or they spend money on such thing is in temples, because there is a quid pro quo requirement that you go to God and say that, look, I put this much, you give me back something, to my children, to myself, give me happiness. So it's a kind of bargaining takes place. So that's where a lot of money go. We build a lot of temples and the funding goes there. Nothing wrong with it. I'm not, please don't say that we don't want temples. But what I'm saying is basically Waves, for example, is a classical case. For years together, I've been going with a begging bowl, asking money that for, holding a conference, particularly physical conference, requires $60,000 to $70,000, and to get it is very difficult. So fortunately, we have a very big donor, our own president, who has done an excellent job on this, and we are working with it. See, but same way I'm talking about, it is whether in India or whether it's abroad, the same story. So if you want this type of attitude, that you want to do something, I think the funding is very important. Without that, nothing is going to work. And how do we go for funding? I think we got to make a pitch to the rich people, particularly the elite of the society in India. And I think next time when I speak, I'm going to talk about it, where to go. Like you have Ambanis who have got billions of dollars. You have the Birlas who have got billions of dollars. And sure, I'm sure we must know how to go around and get this money. They will support. If we had a kind of people like Professor Balram Singh is there. He has done a lot of work on this. Dr. Sasi Tiwari is there. And if we were to approach, I think sure this way we can have a nice way of working what we are trying to do. And I think that's what my appeal to all of you is that please cooperate. We may have our individual egos, but keep aside your individual egos, that eventually what we are looking for is a common thing, that how do we bring the same thing, the whole such knowledge, profound knowledge that Vedas has given, all the Upanishads have given, how do we take it to the common people? And that's what I would like to find it out. If all of people are agreeable, we can work on that solution.
Thank you very much. Shri Kalyan Ramanji wants to say something.
I have a question for him before maybe he can speak to that question, if it is okay.
Please go ahead.
Kalyan Ramanji actually is very related to this language thing, because he has worked on this scripts, different scripts. Lipi, just for Kabindraji, before Kabindraji objects for his scripts to be Lipi. Lipi and has the connection to Sanskrit. It's like, it seems obviously there was a language which was before Sanskrit. Because all the evidence that he has shown. How is that, my question is, how is that connected to, the whole construct of Sanskrit being that old, and then I know we are probably going back a little bit, the chronology discussion we had yesterday. So if you're finding all these things, maybe 6,000, 7,000, 10,000 years old lipis that we are not able to translate, then where is Sanskrit fitting in this? And that's number one. And number two, because I may not get a chance to say anything again, I have asked a gentleman who has contacted me by the name of Alok. He sent me 300 pages of some book, written on some metal, and I've introduced your name to him so that he may be contacting you. So please, if you can answer my question.
Namaskar, Reena Kapoorji. I have 2 points to make. Dr. Sasi Tiwari ji raised a question about coconut tree. When Professor Komarath made his presentation so beautiful. He referred to celestial navigation. When you come down to the earth on the ocean or the waters of the rivers and the coastline, coconut tree becomes very important. A French group of archaeologists found a shipwreck in Ain Sukna, north of Suez Canal on the Red Sea. That shipwreck was of a cargo boat, a sewn boat. The boat planks were sewn using coconut fiber. Coconut fiber was not available in Egypt, not available in Israel, but available in Kerala. So the sewn boats were made in Kerala and used for transporting cargo into the Red Sea, possibly by our traders. So it's called catamaran, sangadam. Portuguese use that word sangada, jangada. So this is how the language evolution takes place with reference to the group of people who create these products, as Kumarji has so beautifully demonstrated. So I would request Kumarji to add the third example of the sewn boat from Kerala that ended up in the Red Sea, 19th century before Common Era. So now, how do these words expand? The decipherment of the Indus script has given us a very good clue. All our languages are interlinked. The conversation between Patanjali and the cart driver, the Rathakara, is very instructive. That cart driver replies to Patanjali when Patanjali makes a comment that you are using lecha words, mispronouncing words. What are you trying to do? That cart driver replies to Patanjali, you are a grammarian, you try to derive words. I am only an ordinary driver. I use my stylish words the way I like it. I like it, and therefore I use it. So this is the liking of the people results in the dialectical variations. But the Sanskritam is such a rich source. We have the beautifully built up etymological frameworks from a root word, from the dhatu, and that finds reflection in all the tatsamas and tadbhavas of all the Indian languages. So if you continue to study the Indian languages, you'll find an answer to Rishik Tiwari's question of why a coconut tree. You'll be able to see a remarkable way of using the technologies that are available with the people and the way they share that information among themselves. So the Sanskritam, Professor Balram Singh Ji, becomes a very important resource for us to link up all these languages together. The Tibetan, the Austroasiatic, the Dravidian, the Indo-Aryan, the Maithili, the Malayalam, the Tamil, the Kerala, the Kashmiri or Pashto, or the Afghan variants, with the Khmer languages of Laos or Vietnam. So we'll be able to reconstruct a core vocabulary, as Jeffrey Armstrong has pointed out, which are very unique, which have evolved over time in these cultural contexts. So the cultural framework within which these terms and their meanings evolve have got to get documented. So in the course of this multidisciplinary coursework of artificial intelligence, we also have to have multidisciplinary studies related to evolution of languages, evolution of writing systems, as we have seen in the 9,000 inscriptions of the Indus script, which have been cracked. So the finance minister makes a thundering statement. Come on, it seems as though we had millennia of support from the artisans or traders who created the wealth of the nation and created economic development process. That's what explains the richness of our country, as Dhirubhai pointed out, of 33% of the world GDP being contributed by the ancient Indians in one common era. So we'll be able to reconstruct the economic history back to 7,000 before common era. I think it's possible, Komaradji, we can arrive there based on the material that is available archaeologically, the linguistic material that is available in terms of evolution of languages, and the metallurgical, the technological advances that took place, either of making a boat or making an alloy and creating new artifacts, or taking fiber from the cotton and creating textiles, or fiber from the silk thread and making some silk saris and so on. We become the clothiers of the world. The word Sindhan means cotton. Sindhu, Hindu. So that's how the evolution of these words are got to be explained to the children. People who will participate in this artificial intelligence disciplines that will be coming up in the course of the study of this civilization to enrich our knowledge and open new vistas for developing applications in artificial intelligence, machine learning, encryption systems, and also consciousness studies. So that is the frontier of knowledge we are reaching. I think we will arrive there. That is my thinking. Namaskar, Kapurji. Dhanyavad.
One very quick point. So the word catamaran is this is my expertise in linguistics. That is very recent. As far as I know, it comes from the word kettumaram. Okay, maram means wood or tree. Kettu means tie.
Yeah.
The basic catamaran is something that is a bunch of logs tied together. Okay, or in other words, a multi-hulled. I think people are now talking about multi-hulled aircraft carriers for the Indian Navy. They all are, so the catamaran is definitely, of course, I take credit as a Malayali for all of these things. But I think the Tamil has the same name.
Yeah, the Marathi have got Sangada. Sangada is a cargo boat. Sangadam, Malayalam word. Sangadam, that became the Portuguese word.
Sangadam,
now the language evolution took place in terms of the navigation.
Right. So one more point, I think, to the question of how can we move much faster. The pioneer always takes very, very long because you have some doubts with yourself. You tell somebody and they say they don't pay attention, they don't agree with you, whatever. It sets you back a little bit, and then you keep on moving. But once it has reached this stage, today it can move very fast. Start a WhatsApp group, okay, and then start an internet discussion. You'll see, literally thousands of people will contribute, and in this kind of thing, we need contributions from thousands of places. I'll give you one example on that. Long time ago, I don't know, maybe around 2000 or somewhere, I remember somebody said something, and I said, look, this is like my mother used to tell me. You read the whole Ramayana, and at the end you say, what is that? Who is this Sitan, masculine, to this Rama, which is a feminine? Okay, what is this relationship? And they all started laughing, and they said, in 5 or 6 different Indian languages, from Assam, Kashmir, of course, Hindi, everybody said, my mother also told me exactly the same thing. So this is the commonality of civilization. If we had people from Thailand and Japan, they would have said the same thing also. You see. So yeah, we need to bring about these things, and we should use modern technology to help us in these things.
Absolutely agree with you. To have such great scholars on the same platform is genuinely it's genuinely a rare event or an occasion. But I want this discussion to carry on for hours, but we have the limitation of the time. So keeping in mind my limitation, I would like to thank for such a wonderful discussion. And I think, first of all, I would like to thank Shashi Madam, Dr. Shashi Tiwari ji, for providing me this opportunity. So I thank you. I have no words to thank you, but I can say thank you. Then I would like to give my sincere thanks to the panelists, the chair of this session, and for enlightening not only the audience, but all the attendees, those who are attendees through any mode, and especially for answering my queries, for satisfying my quest of this literary quest, because as a student I have a lot of questions. I wish that soon we will get a chance to meet you all again, so that we can especially I can ask more of my questions. And with these words, I would like to thank Shri Driyusha ji, Professor Kamrat ji, Professor Armstrong ji, and Shri Kalyan Raman ji. Thank you so much, each and everyone, for connecting with us, for being with us and encouraging us. Thanks a lot.
tomorrow same time we will be meeting again.
जी.
तब तक के लिए नमस्ते.
Namaste. And let us think over this discussion again and again.
बहुत से अभी प्रश्न रहते हैं वैसे.
I think we have
एक प्रश्न तो अभी बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट रह गया रीना.
no such power.
वो डॉक्टर जेफरी से था कि डिक्शनरी में कितने शब्द उन्होंने लिए संस्कृत के. In English dictionary, how many Sanskrit words are included? Because in Hindi dictionary, we have included many English words. So I have heard that guru, karma, yoga, these words are in English dictionary nowadays. No.
Not with correct definitions, and that is the problem. They're supposedly there, but the definition is terrible because, again, they have not paid correct attention to the necessary clarity and details. And you don't have people doing it who are making these distinctions. So yes, they're trying to be in the dictionary, but it's not the correct form of the word. As my dear friend Rajiv Malhotra points out, those are all still mistaken translations, acting as if English equivalents will exist. But what we all agree upon is they do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clear. Thank you for clearing everything. So now we can close, I think. If Dr. Kejriwal ji is here, you can call. President of Word Association. Shri Kejriwal ji.
I don't see his.
He left, I think.
Then Dhiru Shah ji can close.
Yes, thank you very much. Namaste. बहुत अच्छा सेशन रहा और बताऊं कि किसी भी ऐसा टाइम मिलेगा तो करना चाहिए ऐसी बातें.
Let us think more and more.
More and more.
शशि जी, मैं डॉक्टर चांद भारद्वाज बोल रहा हूँ. मैं चाहूंगा कि
our tradition.
Sorry.
I am traditional, very much traditional. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for such a good discussion.
चांद भरद्वाज जी को कुछ कहना था. चांद भरद्वाज जी.
जी.
कुछ कहना है आपको?
हाँ जी, मैं कहना चाह रहा था कि सभी डिक्शनरीज में all over the world we can approach the dictionary people and send them the new version of our explanations of these words, you know. तो सभी डिक्शनरियों में चेंज हो जाए तो अच्छा होगा.
ठीक है.
That's what I meant, you know. That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. कल मिलते हैं सबको. प्रणाम. नमस्ते.
Namaste. Namaste.